Hi, Elizabeth. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today, for accepting to be here with me to do this Zoom meeting. I'm super excited to do it. It's the first time I'm doing this at From
Yes,
Pemberley to Milton,
me too. I'm,
and
I'm
it had to be with you.
absolutely excited.
This had to be with you. I mean, nobody else would have the courage to be here and to try this for the first time except you.
Well,
So
I'm really glad I'm trying it with a friend so that those of you who are watching this don't know that we just had like 15 minutes of fixing our hair and our light and wardrobe changes.
yeah.
So yeah, like not everybody would do that.
But hopefully we'll manage, and
Yeah,
I
we're
hope
good.
that people will like to watch this and to get to know you a little better, and to get to know your new book, because that's what we're here to talk about today. So tell us a little bit about yourself as an author. What have you written? And Sons of Pemberley, because I want to hear everything about Sons of Pemberley.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I'm Elizabeth Adams. This is my 8th book. I started with The House Guest, which was a massive sort of accident that happened.
It's still my
Um,
favorite today,
yes, it's
so
so funny. You know, it's my least favorite of all my books. That's
oh
what's
my
so funny. But
god.
everybody else loves it, so I'm not messing with it. But I look at it and I'm like, that was very much a first book. Like I see now as an experienced author, I look back and I see all the mistakes and I'm just like,
Oh no, it's so perfect. I love it.
so yeah, it's probably the only one of my books that I don't occasionally reread because I have a couple of others that sometimes when I just like want to relax, I will occasionally reread something because I know it won't stress me out.
Hmm.
So because I know what's happening. But yeah, so that's me. And then my so Sons of Pemberley. So this book, I've been referring to it and have it saved on my computer as The Beast because it's so involved. So I would say it kind of harkens back to The House Guest, oddly, in the sense that there are a lot more characters and a lot of like smaller plot lines following along, or kind of, if you think of it like the main plot line is like a river, there are a bunch of other like tributary plot lines kind of flowing in. And I
Hmm.
did that with The House Guest. And then every other book since then has been more and more and more focused, like sticking with just a few characters, more limited points of view,
Hmm.
fewer people, fewer plot lines, fewer, like less, unwieldy parts of the book. But this one is a beast. It has so many characters. I have like literally I have Excel spreadsheets of family trees going back like 5 generations, and this is Lady Anne's family, and this is the Dryden branch, and the Digby's of the Somerset Digby's. There's fancy people. He's a baronet, and all that. The reader doesn't even need to know this, but I needed to know it so that when I was writing about her family, I would know everything. So basically,
Hmm.
Sons of Pemberley is a family saga. So it's all these
Okay.
characters. We're mostly, so basically, it focuses on primarily on the men who grow up in Pemberley. And that was the plan until Lady Anne just hijacked the story. So she originally was sort of like secondary character. She was interesting. I liked her. She had a lot of great lines, but she was not the primary character. And then the more I wrote, the more she just was like, excuse me, this is my story.
Okay.
And I decided to keep the name because some people were like, why did you stick with Sons of Pemberley when Lady Anne is a main character? But I think the secret brilliance of that is that Lady Anne is the one female character that is central to all of these men. So she is George Darcy's wife. She's Fitzwilliam, Nathaniel, and Luke's mother. She is Samuel Wickham's employer slash friend.
Miss
She's
Darcy
father.
has brothers.
Oh, girl, I sent it to your Kindle. Did you see that? That I
Yeah, I
sometimes
have it here.
so so for you guys who don't know this, I have Rita's Kindle email, and sometimes I just send her things to be sneaky, and then she'll message me, "Did you send me something?" Like some book randomly showed up in my Kindle. It's like,
True
yes,
story.
true story. So yeah, so that. But so she hasn't read this yet. Oh my God. So that's crazy. But I'm sorry. What was the question?
If Mr. Darcy had brothers, because that's
Yes.
something new.
Oh, okay. Okay. So here's what happened. Here's what happened. And you just have to give me some sort of signal. My quarantine hair gets really bad. Okay. So anyway, so basically the idea was if Lady Anne supposedly dies when Georgiana Darcy is small, because I have always felt in Pride and Prejudice that Georgiana Darcy behaves like a girl who does not have a mother.
Hmm.
And she behaves like a girl who doesn't really have any like older female influences. She doesn't have a grandmother, she doesn't have an aunt that she's close to. And if Lady Anne only had Lady Catherine as her sister, I can certainly understand why there are no aunts. So maybe George Darcy like didn't have a sister, or she wasn't alive, or she lived
Hmm.
far away, or whatever. But for whatever reason, her two guardians are like a 30-year-old guy in the army, and then her 28-year-old brother. Sorry, I'm like shooing people out of the room. Like I've told, there are 4 people living in this house. I told 3 of them to leave me alone, and they're still coming in here. Why? Anyway, I'll edit that out later. So anyway, I wanted to explain a couple of things, or I wanted to explore a couple of things. Firstly, why was there such a big age gap between Fitzwilliam and Georgiana? So I think that potentially could have been explained by George and Lady Anne just like not being that into each other, maybe.
Hmm.
But this was a time period when children died really frequently. I have a hard time believing that after Fitzwilliam's birth, they didn't go for a spare. Like they have, the heir and the spare.
So
Why
you're
didn't,
gonna give him brothers, but you're gonna kill them.
no, okay. I can't give away the whole
No
story. So here's
spoilers.
what happened. So so the first thing I'm doing is I'm explaining everything that happened. So the story begins. Okay, this is why it's called a beast. So y'all bear with me for a minute. So we have 2 kind of side-by-side storylines. So we have our 1811 storyline, which starts in the spring of 1811 before Bingley comes to Netherfield. It starts in London. Darcy's there with his mother. She makes him dance and be polite. So he's a little bit nicer than he normally is because she's like eagle eyes watching him like dance with those ladies. So he has to. So there's that. And then we have this flashback, which is a bigger chunk of the book that starts really when Fitzwilliam is born, like 2 weeks after he's born. And so we see his parents, and they had mentioned that the steward at Pemberley, Mr. Wickham, was like an excellent man and very trustworthy and all of this. So I create this character, Samuel Wickham, who's supposed to be the excellent steward, and I make him this lifelong childhood friend of George Darcy. So the prologue of the book, so I'm not really giving this away because it happens in the first like 2 pages, is that when George Darcy is a child, like 10 years old, he almost drowns in a pond, and Samuel Wickham saves him. So this begins their friendship, and they stay friends throughout their entire lives. So then Samuel goes away he joins the army. He goes away to fight in the American Revolutionary War, comes back injured, and George offers him to start training as the steward of Pemberley because he trusts him and he knows everybody in the area already and everybody else trusts him and blah, blah, blah.
Hmm.
So that's how that whole thing starts. And
Okay.
so I wanted to explain what happened. Like, how are they friends? If Samuel Wickham is such a good guy, how is his son just a raving jackwagon? Like, how does that happen, right? Like, how do you have this awesome dad and this horrible child? So I wanted to know about that. I wanted to know why there aren't any other children between Georgiana and Fitzwilliam. I mean, 12 years is a big gap. I have 3 kids in 5 years in modern times. So I'm just curious, like, were there children? Did they die? Did she have multiple miscarriages? What happened? So we
Hmm.
start there. And then that story kind of progresses along. We see what happens. And then my second thing I really wanted to explore, and that kind of like everything hinges on this one thing, because it just occurred to me, what if Lady Anne doesn't die when we think she does? Because I've always gotten the impression that she died when Georgiana was very young. Maybe when Georgiana was born, like died in childbirth, which would make sense that, because they have no more children. So it
Hmm.
would make sense that she died in childbirth, or when she's very, very young, which would explain Georgiana's personality and why there are no more kids. So what if that didn't happen? Like, what if she just doesn't die? So, and what I actually do in the book is I swap. I make the person, so I show the situation where Lady Anne would have died, and
Hmm.
I put someone else in that place. And so that person dies. And so now the woman who died is alive, and the person who would have lived is now dead. And let's see how that changes the story. And that's when all hell breaks loose. So basically, it just really, really, really shifts. Everything shifts from that point. So there are a ton of original characters, and that's when Darcy's younger brothers are born. So they're younger than Georgiana because his mother doesn't die.
Okay.
So that's the whole. So I didn't kill them off.
And you were saying that this was a saga, but you're talking about the generation before Darcy,
Yes.
and about Darcy's generation. Are you going
Yes.
forward as well?
Not right now. So in
Okay.
the because this got to 130,000 words, and at some point you just gotta stop it. Like I seriously was at a point where I felt like I could have kept going and going and going, like one of those online fanfics that had like 500,000 words. Like we were headed in that direction. So I was like, okay, we're gonna pause and see how this, because what's interesting to me is not necessarily interesting to readers. So the whole point of me taking the trouble to type all of this out and make it sound good is for you guys. I can imagine this in my mind in an afternoon and I'm satisfied. So if it's just for me, I'm gonna like find a sunny spot and I'm just gonna sit down and daydream for a few hours and be done. But if it's for you, then I'll put a few months of typing into it. So yeah,
Okay.
it's kind of, it's a hot mess.
Okay, so I've got a gazillion questions for you,
Go.
but I promised my readers I would ask you their questions.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So let's hear what they have to say, what they want to know. And we have Christina, and Christina is actually asking, what first inspired this story? How did you come up with this idea?
Okay, so this is really fun. So I am going to post this on my website by the time this thing goes live. I will post this on my website so you can go read it. So this whole thing started with one scene where Lady Anne was alive when George Darcy, the senior Mr. Darcy, dies. And George Wickham comes like swaggering in. And he's like, give me my money, and I'm so charming, and don't you want to give me all the things? And she's just like such a snob, like such a raving snob. And so she basically gives him half the money her husband would have given him. Oh my God. And she has talked her husband into giving George Wickham less of a legacy and not giving him the living. So she gives him his 500 pounds instead of the 1,000-pound legacy he was originally going to get. And she tells him that she never wants to see him on Pemberley property ever, ever, ever again. And that includes her grown son. That includes everybody. And so she basically puts him in his place. And then when he leaves, this was the whole deal. She looks at this painting of her and George Darcy on the wall. And she says, and that, Mr. Darcy, is how you deal with the steward's son. She's just like, she's like, she's such a royal snob. I love it. Like, so her blood is so blue, it's scary. So she can't be bothered with George Wickham. Like, she does not care. And that's originally what started it. And sadly, that scene has been cut. So that scene is not in the book. So I will post it on my website so you can read the whole thing as an outtake. And it broke my heart the day that I cut it out. But that is how it all started. And I think I just woke up thinking, like, how would that go? And I don't know, it just came to me. Like, it would be so funny to see how she behaves towards George Wickham. Because, I mean, she literally, if she is alive, everything changes. Like, everything you know about the Darcy family is different if Lady Anne is alive. So anyway,
that's why Jeff is so wonderful, because a small change can change everything in the story.
Yes.
It's incredible.
That's why I love it.
So you're talking a lot about Anne and about another generation, and it actually goes back to a lot of the questions that I have here. Jen, for example, she says that she's fascinated by backstories and events before everything was written. So, the events before Pride and Prejudice, which is basically what you're telling us. And she's asking you if it was difficult to write these backstories namely the ones of Darcy's and Wickham's parents, and which part of the process stuck out to you?
Of the process of the backstory or the process
Yeah,
overall?
the
Okay.
process of the backstory.
Um, no, it was not difficult. It was actually a joy. This is probably the most joyful I have felt writing since I wrote The House Guest. Like, it didn't feel like work. It felt like just, woo! Like, I felt like lit on fire. I love the characters. I just want to hang out with them. Like, I want them to be my next door neighbors. I want them to be my friends. I want us to all have great Christmas parties together. Let's go to the beach with Lady Anne. I want to do that. I want George Darcy to be my dad. Actually, I want George Darcy to be my husband. And I want everybody, I think he out Darcy's Darcy. I'm just saying.
Oh,
Like, I mean, I like a
that's
Darcy of
putting the
any,
bar very, very high.
isn't it though?
Yeah.
But yeah, I like a Darcy of any vintage. So, but I feel like understanding George Darcy helps us understand Fitzwilliam Darcy.
Hmm.
So I feel like Fitzwilliam Darcy is like Darcy 2.0. So we've got this original who's just like, ah. And then we've got the new one. I found it very enjoyable. It was not a struggle. It was not difficult. The only thing that was hard about it was that I was writing in a time period I had not written in before.
Yeah.
So normally I write in the Regency.
Yeah.
This pushed me back a good 30 years to writing in the Georgian era. So suddenly I was writing in the 1780s, and it's not a huge difference in time, but it is enough of a difference. Like, the clothes were very different. The sort of style of behavior was a little bit different. So I had to do some research, a lot of clothing research, which was interesting. And then I ended up not really using any of it in the book. Like, life
That's
of the
part of the
historical
fun.
isn't it though? But like, I know
Yeah.
all about like all the dresses that they would have worn and all this craziness. But yeah, so I would say no, it was not hard. And the part that stood out to me, there's a secondary thread in this. So it centers on the Darcy family, but there's a sort of auxiliary family, if you will, that lives in Lambton that's connected to Samuel Wickham. And there are these two cousins who are raised kind of like sisters. They live together, and it's Rachel and Rebecca. And I actually, fun fact, grew up with a pair of sisters named Rachel and Rebecca. And I was friends with both of them. And my friend Rachel might watch this. So, hi, Rachel. And so anyway, I promised her when I used their names that I would make her the nice one. But anyway, they were both quite nice when we were growing up. They're both good sisters, but that's where I got the idea for the names. And they are sort of like shopkeeper level, so kind of lower middle class or middle class.
Hmm.
And that was another thing that I'd not really done before. I normally did, upper class gentry. I mean, maybe lower level gentry,
Hmm.
but not really low. And kind of explored some things with a new class that's new. And that was interesting. And I would say that their story stood out to me. I think the character is Rachel Connolly, and I'm very curious to see what you would think about her, actually.
Okay. Oh.
I really like Rachel Connolly, and I think she kind of does a sort of make or break in the book. I think she turned out to be an important character. So I would say that stood out to me. Yeah.
Okay, that's fun. Well, Glynis wants to know if you determined Wickham's character from the start.
Oh my God, no. I'm assuming she means young Wickham. So older Wickham, yes. Older Wickham was going to be like the man. He was like the perfect guy. He's so wonderful. And then just like life just keeps throwing crap at him. And it sucks. And, first he gets shot in a war, and he has nowhere to go. Then his wife is this evil cow. Then his son turns out to be like terrible. Like, can the man
Poor
just get a
guy.
break? Exactly. So yeah, so that's how it started. And so I knew Samuel Wickham kind of from the beginning. Like, I had a good feel for Samuel Wickham as a character and as a man. But George Wickham totally snuck up on me. He pulled a Lady Anne and just kind of changed everything. And it happened in the Jaff and June conference. So you were there.
Yeah.
You saw the transformation. So I was discussing the story with some people, And I think afterward, after the session officially ended, some of us kind of hung around and were chatting. And I was just like, should I redeem Wickham? Should I not redeem Wickham? I don't
I
know. I
remember
felt,
that.
yeah, like there were so many like redeem Wickham stories. And I felt like I didn't want to be cliche. But at the same time, as I was getting to know Wickham as a child, I kind of felt like I had to. Like, because, okay, here's something you need to know about me as a person that I am a major over identifier, like major. So I don't read books. I live in books. I become a character in the story. It's really terrible. And this is why I can't read scary books. And this is why I don't watch scary movies, because I feel like someone is chasing me. So I can't do it. So when I was writing this book, I started to feel like Wickham was like my nephew. And like I was one of these women in his life who's like Lady Anne sort of watches Wickham the whole time with this like jaundiced eye, you know. She doesn't really trust him. She doesn't trust his mother for good reason. And she doesn't trust him, and she's like, you know, your dad's a nice guy, but you're a little squirrely, you know. And I started to feel just protective of him, and I couldn't ruin his life. I just, so Wickham is and is not redeemed. So I will say that. I would say that Wickham is different, because I think redeemed implies that he's horrible and then gets better. And he's quite a different character. He does go through a horrible phase and does some nasty things like most adolescents do, and scares himself a little bit and learns some really hard information and has some really hard experiences. But I think he's just very, very different from any other Wickham
You know,
I've
the
ever
fun
read.
thing is that you're saying that you kind of became protective of Wickham. And my next question was from, or is from Marie, and she's actually saying that she kind of thinks you're not a big fan of Wickham, that you never really liked him, and she's asking if that influenced his character in Sons of Pemberley.
Okay,
So do you
I think
like
I
him
saw
or
this
not?
question. Okay, what I don't like is his storyline, because Wickham is, I'm sorry, can we just rant for a second? Wickham is essentially a plot device. He is there to show that that Elizabeth is gullible, and that if you flatter her enough, she'll believe you, because she lives in a small town and she's young and vain. So, also known as every
I love that.
20-year-old woman
I
everywhere.
love that description of Elizabeth. I'm
Yeah,
sorry, but it's just
it's
because not a lot of people say this, but it's kind of true.
it's totally true. And
Yeah.
it's also true of virtually every 20-year-old woman you will ever meet. I mean, think about it. Like when you're that young, if some guy insulted you in public, you would hate him forever. He would be hashtag canceled. Like it's over. Like I will end you. Like you would hate him. So, and this was her hometown. It was interesting that when Darcy makes that insult to Elizabeth, he says that I will not give consequence to women who were slighted by other men. And I think what's interesting is in modern day, we don't even think about that statement because we don't talk like that. But basically, what he is saying is that if I, Mr. Important, Rich, Handsome Man, dance with sad, pathetic, rejected girl, I will make her look better. And what's so freaking funny about that is he's a total stranger here. No one knows him. This is her hometown. They have known her entire life, and she's not even ugly. So, and even if she was, how rude is that to say that? So, anyway, point being that it's so ridiculously arrogant of him to think that he can improve her standing in her own hometown when he's been there 5 whole minutes. So, I think that the insult is actually much worse than we think it is. So we think, oh, he called her ugly in public, and that's bad. I mean, that's bad any way you shake it. But he also, like, you know, said you're not important and you don't matter, and I make you special. You know, that's stupid. So I think she is vain, and I think Wickham's role in the original story, he has multiple purposes. He is a foil to Darcy to make Darcy look honorable, to make Darcy look good, to provide an opportunity for Darcy to rescue everybody and save the day. Because what is a good hero without a decent villain? So Wickham just serves the purpose of the bad guy. quite frankly, Lydia could have eloped with anybody and it would have been just as bad. She could have eloped with Captain Denny. It doesn't matter. The reason it's special that it's Wickham is that Darcy has this history with Wickham, so it makes it that much more awful. So we're just stacking everything against Elizabeth. You know, her family is vulgar. She has no money. She has no connections. Her sister is a raving freaking lunatic. Now you get to be brothers with your arch enemy. Congratulations. You know, we're just making it harder and harder and harder and harder for him to love her. But it was stacked pretty high before Wickham ever entered this picture, you know? So I think Wickham is a plot device. I don't think he's like the best character ever. And I am so
So you
freaking
don't
tired.
like him. She was right.
Well,
Marie was right.
yes, but it's not him that I don't like, although I don't like him. It's that I don't like his role in the story. Yeah,
Okay.
sorry.
Well, I get that. I get
Rant.
that. Personally, I prefer not to have him in the story.
Yeah, like what's the point? I also hate Mr. Collins, which he's not in this book, by the way. Thank God.
Oh.
You're welcome.
Okay, Elizabeth, I've got a question from Jamie, and I love this question. She wants to know if this book was a Netflix miniseries, who would you see as Lady Anne and who would you see as George Darcy?
First of all, Netflix, call me. I'm available. Secondly, okay, so full disclosure, Jamie was my original cold reader on this story. A few people came along later, but Jamie has been with me since day one. She's my girl. I love her. And I will tell you, Jamie thinks that George Darcy should be Liam Neeson.
Okay.
Okay, so George Darcy in the book is described as being really big, like a really larger than life kind of, almost a person who's like a giant, like huge. So for George Darcy, I have 3 images. So Liam Neeson from Jamie, who I had not thought of until she said, but I kind of like that's an okay idea. This is so embarrassing. You can laugh at me really hard if you want to, because it's funny. So you know that Disney cartoon?
Cartoon?
I know, it's bad. So you know the cartoon Brave with the girl with the red hair? And she's
Yeah.
bow and arrow? Her dad, how he's this like huge, like, whoa, kind of guy.
I don't know him, but I
It's
cannot
so
imagine a
embarrassing.
cartoon as George Darcy. I don't know. It's just
Well, I know, and I didn't envisage him as a cartoon, but just like that kind of a character that I couldn't even think of a real life person. So when I was giving cast kind of ideas to my narrator, so she could have a better idea of how I saw these characters, because the
it's
audiobook
coming
is
out on
already,
audio. On audio.
it's halfway done.
Ah, nice, nice. Who's
Yeah,
the narrator?
she started, so it's Elizabeth Grace who did,
Okay.
yeah, she recently did Obstinate Headstrong Girl for Christina
Yeah,
Boyd,
she's awesome.
which, yeah, she's amazing. And she did Green Card for Me, which was like epic, like so good. So anyway, yeah, she actually has been recording it for a while. Like before the book was even done, she had already started recording it.
So for her to get inspired, you told her, okay,
I
when
told
you are
her,
reading the passages from George Darcy, you think about
the dad
a
from Brave.
cartoon that is a dad from, okay.
And if I was
I
casting
think you
him
should go
myself,
for the third option. What is the third option?
Gregory Peck.
I don't know that one.
Oh,
Who's
yes,
that guy?
you do. Yes, you do. He is the American reporter in Roman Holiday with Audrey Hepburn.
Damn, I don't know
He's
that
the
movie.
dad in To Kill a Mockingbird. He's Atticus Finch.
Oh, wait. No.
Be Still My
No.
Beating Heart. He's so handsome.
I'll have to Google
He's
him.
perfect. He's tall and broad-shouldered, and it's not so popular now for tall actors. Like there are more and more short actors. So finding a really big guy, there's actually a guy in my old neighborhood who kind of suits George Darcy, but y'all don't know him.
So it's not a valid one.
Let's
What
go
about
with
Lady Anne?
Lady
Who
Anne
should be
has
Lady Anne?
always been the whole time one person, Tilda Swinton. Pictured Lady Anne as very monotone in her color, really light eyes, light hair, pale skin, like white eyebrows. And Tilda Swinton has that look. And I picture Lady Anne as very bird-like. Like she's very tall and very slim, like almost painfully slender, like super, super thin. All the people in her family have this sort of like birdish vibe. And I felt like Tilda Swinton, from the get-go, from day one, she has been my Lady Anne.
Okay, okay. And you're talking about all these generations. You've mentioned a lot of subplots that you have in the book. So I kind of had one question that
Mm-hmm.
Paige also has. So Paige is
Mm.
asking you if you ever thought about splitting the book into separate books.
Oh gosh.
And
Okay,
she kind
see,
of, I'm not sure if she wanted, but she's kind of
I kind
giving a
of got the impression
suggestion.
maybe she thinks I should have.
Yeah, to focus
Sorry,
on
Paige.
week. Yeah, no, that's not it. I think it's even more interesting than what you're thinking. She's kind of suggesting that maybe you could have one focus on Wickham's story.
Oh, she's suggesting another book. I'm gonna Paige. I'm gonna message you later and ask what you were really talking about. So, that is a good question. Okay, here's the thing. This is gonna make me sound like a
Because
little bit
it's
of
a saga. So if it's a saga, you've got to do more than one.
well, so I have thought about another one.
Not that I'm asking, of course, but
You can ask. We're
I kind
friends.
of am. You have to
So
make another one.
you can ask me anything you want. I might not answer, but you can ask. Okay, so I did not split this particular book up into two stories because I felt like the 1811 storyline didn't make sense without the other storyline. So
Hmm.
that's why I didn't split this one. Um, Plus, it would have been like one is pure tragedy and one is bordering on a comedy of errors, and there's no balance.
Hmm.
So in this
Okay.
one, sorry, my
It's more
hair.
balanced if it's just one.
It's more balanced if it's one. I have thought about doing a book on and calling it something like the wild adventures of Lady Anne Pickering, sorry, Lady Mary Ann Pickering, because Darcy has this cousin in the book who he's very close to from birth. Like she's born 4 weeks after him, and they tell this later in the story, but their mothers are best friends. So okay, so here's the generations. So there are two sisters, Digby sisters, and they're both very beautiful, and they both marry very well. So their father is a baronet, so they're kind of like the Elliot sisters, right, in
Hmm.
terms of station. So their
Hmm.
father is a wealthy baronet. They're so pretty. So one marries off to an earl, and the other marries off to the Earl of Matlock, right? So she becomes Lady Anne's mother. So the two sisters are very close. Then they have children together. So this one over here has her daughter, Lady Julia, and this one has her daughter, Lady Anne. So Anne and Julia grow up together their whole lives, and they're like besties. So Anne has the pretty mother, but the not so pretty father. So poor Anne, God love her, is a little bit horsey. So she's attractive, but she's not beautiful. Whereas Julia, lucky girl, inherited her mother's beauty. And so we have the kind of really pretty cousin who then goes on to make a spectacular marriage to another earl. And then we have Lady Anne over here who can't get an earl and she marries George Darcy. So that's the like these we have these best friend sisters and then best friend cousins. And then they both get pregnant around the same time, and Lady Anne has Fitzwilliam Darcy, and her cousin Julia, her best friend in the whole world, has Lady Mary Ann. And Mary Ann and Fitzwilliam grow up together. So we don't see them a lot when they're super little, but starting when they're about 10 years old, the focus of the story shifts a little bit to them. And
Hmm.
they get into trouble together. They train their dog to do tricks together. They do the things that children do. And they're adorable and they're extremely attached to one another. And then and they grow up together and live together, and she is kind of like the woman in his life and he's the man in her life, but they're like best friends slash like almost siblings because
So
Georgiana's
she's not a
still,
rival to Elizabeth.
oh god, not at all. In
Okay.
fact, she at one point in the story she actually thinks um she thinks it would have been convenient if she had fallen in love with Fitzwilliam because he is handsome and everything, but
Hmm.
it's just like kissing her brother and she can't do it. So I mean, I love you and all, but stay over there.
Okay.
So yeah, so I have. She's a very interesting character, and she has a really big role. By the time we meet her in chapter one, she is pregnant in chapter one, and she and Fitzwilliam Darcy are both 27 years old. She's pregnant with her third child, and she is tomboy with a capital T. I mean, she is like, she does not care. Get that lace off her gown. She refuses to have a lady's maid. Her mother is, of course, horrified by all of this. She follows the drum. Her husband is in the army, and she loves being like on campaign, riding a horse across Portugal for you. She loves it. Like this is what she wants to do with her life. And so I think she would be a really fun person to follow. I would love to see her escapades, you know, when she's on the like
Hmm.
out at war. What is she doing? What is happening? Like I would love to see that. I think she's an interesting person that would be nice to follow. And then she, of course, really likes Elizabeth and becomes friends with. And what happens at Netherfield, not that you asked, but I'm just telling you, is that the 1811 storyline gets a little crazy. So in the original, we have Bingley's family, right? We've got Bingley, his sister Caroline, and then his other sister Louisa and her husband.
Hmm.
So in this story, and this starts in chapter 1, so I'm not spoiling it. So Bingley kind of loves Lady Anne. He's like this sad little puppy who needs a mom. And she's just like, oh, sweet baby, let me take care of you. So, because he reminds her kind of her husband when he was younger and etc. So she invites Bingley to go with them to the seaside. And all this happens at the very beginning of the book. So Bingley feels that Lady Anne has done this nice thing for him, you know, and taken him to the seaside and gotten to know her family. And her cousin, Lady Julia, is there. Lady Marianne is there. So Bingley kind of gets pulled into the Darcy family immediately. So then Bingley wants to return the favor. So guess who he invites to Netherfield? So,
Everybody, including
yeah.
Lady Anne.
So he invites, originally it's Lady Anne and Darcy and Georgiana and his little brother Luke. And so originally it's just those people. Well, then Marianne is headed north. She needs to stop, and it just adds up. Then Lady Marianne ends up coming with her husband and her new baby. She gives birth in this period, and then so she's got a new baby, and the baby is so convenient. Anytime you need to get someone out of the room, oh, the baby's crying. The perfect plot device. If you, I need these two people to be alone. Okay, the baby's crying. So it's really convenient. But anyway, so it starts with, we get Lady Marianne there. Then Lady Marianne decides that this would be so much more fun if Colonel Fitzwilliam came also. So
Oh my God, everybody's going to Netherfield?
everybody,
Oh my God,
so
Georgiana as well? Because you were saying that you invited Georgiana.
yeah, so
So there's no
Georgiana,
elopement in Sons of Pemberley.
no, because how could that happen? She's with her mother. There's no way her mother is sending her to the beach with a companion. I am so over that.
Thank you, Elisa.
I'm so over it. Make it
Yeah.
stop. Let's do something more interesting, please.
Hmm.
So yeah, so Georgiana is still shy, but I feel like she doesn't have a huge role just because I wasn't really feeling her for this one, and I've done that before.
Hmm.
And as you've said this about me before, ages ago, or I think it was you. But anyway, that I tend to try new things with the book
Hmm.
because I
Yeah.
get bored easily. So I've done the Georgiana thing. I explored her a lot as a character. I gave her a bigger role. She's nice. I like her, but I was ready for something else.
Hmm.
So I kind of focused on Fitzwilliam's additional family. So we have these three cousins, and you have Marianne, Richard Fitzwilliam, Colonel Fitzwilliam, and Darcy, and they've all grown up together. And Colonel Fitzwilliam and Marianne, you get them together, and it's like hide the silver. Like they're crazy. They're always causing trouble. They're constantly playing jokes on people, and Darcy's sitting there
And
rolling.
Darcy crazy, right?
Yes, and
Driving
but
him
at
crazy,
the
yeah.
same time, he secretly loves it because he's not the person who will start the trouble, but he doesn't
Hmm.
want to be left out either. so, so that kind of all happens, and so poor Elizabeth is like, "What on earth is with you, crazy family?" So yeah, it's. I've lost track of the original question, but that's what.
Actually, I think you're kind of answering my next question. It's from Melissa, and I think you kind of answered her already
Okay.
because Melissa wants to know how you come up with the story, if you do research and plotting, or if you
Yeah.
just let inspiration strike. And I think that anybody who has been listening to this
Yeah.
interview so far already knows the answer, but you just let it flow, right?
Yeah, I just let it flow. So what I did with this one, and I'm gonna rabbit trail for 2 seconds and pull me back on if I take too long.
Hmm.
So I feel very strongly that if you give something its head, like If you let it go, like, you get on a boat out in the open water and you just unfurl the sails and see what happens, something interesting will happen. So I did that with this book with a handful of characters that I wasn't 100% sure about. When I originally started, Lady Marianne was a small character. She was only ever going to be in that first chapter where she says some witty things to Darcy, and that's the end of it. And she was going to maybe have one or two letters. And then she, quite like Lady Anne, was like, excuse me, like, don't you know this book needs me? So
And now
I
she wants a
insist.
book of her own.
And now
So
she
you're
wants
already
her own
starting
book.
to think about a sequel.
She's so demanding. So yeah. And what kind of happened is I just decided at some point that Lady Marianne was compelling. At some point, she just was interesting enough to me. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to let it rip. And I'm just going to see what happens. Lady Marianne, take me where you want. I will follow you. And so I spent a lot of time just like sitting around, and my kids are such brats. Like, they don't understand. Like, I thought you were working. And I'm like, I am working in my mind right now. I'll just sit here and like stare out the window. And in my head, I'm thinking of all the things Marianne does, where she goes. And I kind of, if you've heard of method acting, that's where, like, do you know what I'm talking about? Where the actor kind of tries to become the character.
Yeah.
And they get really involved. So I'm kind of a method writer. I don't even know if that's a thing, if I'm like coining a phrase, but I tried to become the characters a little bit. Like, for example, when I was writing The House Guest, which was obviously my first book, I didn't know anything about writing a full book. I mean, I'd written a handful of short stories and that was it. So I had the hardest time with Georgiana, and I was trying to get into her head and I couldn't do it. So I thought, okay, I'm going to do what Georgiana does. So every day I sat down at that stupid piano and I made myself play it very badly. and I played the piano for hours, and I just make myself. And when I would sit in a situation, and I'm obviously an Elizabeth by nature, I'm not shy, not even a little. Like, there are very few situations where I'm like, like scared, like that does not happen to me. And so I made myself be quiet when I would otherwise talk. And I made myself stay on the outskirts of a group and look in instead of being involved in the group. And I did this for about a week, I think. And then one day, I swear, I woke up. I literally woke up first thing in the morning and I got it. Like, I understood Georgiana. I understood her thoughts, her motives, why she does the things that she does, how she feels and why she feels that way. And then it was so easy to write her. So now I do that with all my characters. I try to kind of get into their skin for a little while and think, what is this person thinking? Why are they behaving the way they're thinking or the way they are? And that makes it really hard to have really one-dimensional characters that you can get. I think very few people
that's what I hate the most about books. Yeah.
Girl, yes. Like, there are very few people that are all bad or all good.
Exactly.
That's not a thing.
It's not realistic. Yeah, it's not realistic.
Which is why we had to save George Wickham.
Spoiler alert. Okay, so Elizabeth, we've got Sonia, and she wants to know which of Austen's character is your favorite, and if that one is the one that you like to write about more, or the one that you prefer to write about.
Oh, golly.
And which one is the most fun to write about?
Oh, gosh. Okay.
So we could be talking about one single character or three different characters. Like, favorite one you prefer to write about and the most fun to write about.
Oh, okay. Okay, what I prefer to, okay. Okay, my favorite character might be Captain Wentworth from Persuasion. Because
one of mine too. I love him. Exactly.
Like,
but I think most people don't like him.
No,
actually.
It's funny. I like him. Okay. Tiny little thing about me is that I come from a family of men. I don't have any sisters. I have 5 brothers. I have 2 fathers. I have 3 grandfathers. And I have been surrounded by men my whole life. It's probably why I enjoy female friends so much, because I'm like, enough with the boys already. But I think that makes it maybe a tiny bit easier for me to understand men, maybe. I could be way wrong. There's probably some man reading my book right now saying she did not understand men.
And despite that, you started writing about the Sons of Pemberley, and you ended up giving a huge role to Lady Anne.
Right,
so
but that wasn't my fault.
Okay,
Lady,
so favorite is Captain Wentworth.
I think my
What's
favorite
the,
is Captain Wentworth, even though
yeah.
he's resentful, because I feel that he's realistic. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, but that letter, anybody who
Exactly.
can write a letter like that, that's all you need to know right there. So, and then my favorite one to write about, Darcy is really fun to write. Wait, is it the question the favorite one or the most fun one? Are those two separate questions?
Two separate questions.
Oh golly. Okay. Okay, the easiest one to write is Elizabeth Bennet, probably because you know how we like to categorize people? Oh, she's a Catherine Morland, she's a Jane
Yeah.
Bennet, she's a Lydia. Ooh. And like every single person I have ever met has said I am an Elizabeth. And so it's probably easy for me to write Elizabeth because I just think like, what would I do in that
Mm-hmm.
situation? And it's probably 9 times out of 10 what she would do. So there's that. But she is fun to write because she can say the most outrageous things. You know who's also really fun to write is Caroline Bingley because sometimes it feels good to be
Really?
bad. So, well, if you just want to be like a cow, like
Mm-hmm.
you just want to say really horrible things and be a little brat, like Caroline Bingley is fun for that. So she can be fun to write. But my favorite to write, it just depends on the day. I don't have a favorite. Like it
Isn't
depends
it
on my
Captain
mood.
Wentworth?
Well, what's funny is I have only written Captain Wentworth one time. So plug for Rational Creatures. So Christina Boyd puts together these
I
new stories.
know.
One of them is called Rational Creatures. That was the first one I did with Christina. And she messaged me and asked, I think you actually told her to message me. I think this is all your fault, Rita. so,
You can thank me later.
so Christina messages me and asks me if I'm interested in the project. And she says, I think you would write a great Anne Elliot. And I was like, okay. So I started thinking about it. And in that scenario, what was interesting is I am so not an Anne Elliot in real life. Like I am really organized and I get stuff done probably because I was the only girl in a house filled with men. I would say I'm more organized than Elizabeth Bennet in that way. But Anne Elliot is like, oh, like Zen master, with all of her stuff. And so it was hard for me to get into her head. But Captain Wentworth, I was like, we are jamming, baby. Because Captain Wentworth, I think maybe, oh God, this means I am so vain. Captain Wentworth is kind of a male me, a little bit. So it was just reversed. Like with Darcy and Elizabeth, Darcy is the quiet one. Like I don't know if you've noticed this with Austen, but she almost always pairs together opposite. Well, not always, but a lot. A quiet one with a loud one. So you have Colonel Brandon with Marianne, and you have Elizabeth with Darcy. You have Jane with Bingley. You have Captain Wentworth, the loud
With
one,
Anne.
with Anne, the quiet one. So, there was that. And so once I realized that Captain Wentworth was kind of like me, it was a little bit easier to write him. But he's hard to write, like, because he's such a man's man. He's like all that testosterone. And I found it difficult. So he's not my favorite to write. No, but he might be my favorite to read. Not that you asked.
I'm very sorry to hear about that because, and that's why I've been talking about Captain Wentworth. Yeah, so the last question from readers is from Anna, and she wants to know when you will write a story about persuasion, which
Okay,
is kind of what I want as well, because there are not enough persuasion books out there,
this is
and
true.
I love to read them.
Here's the very sad truth is that a lot of us authors are doing this as a job, and we use money that we make from books to like feed our children. So unfortunately. So,
Actually, that's what I told Anna when she sent me
yeah,
the question. I was like, okay, Anna, not a lot of people will choose to write about persuasion or secondary characters or stuff like this because it doesn't sell.
yeah.
But I wish it would.
I wish it would sell. And when I did that short story for Rational Creatures, I got really into it and I started like loving Captain Wentworth. I was like, damn. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't say that, right?
It's okay.
But
We'll put
yeah.
a mature audiences on top of the video.
So, but when I was writing him, I was like, I see why she fell for him. Like he was so charming. And I threw in a little modern something something where he's like throwing pebbles at her window at night and he's like, Anne, come to the garden. And she's like sneaking out to make out in the garden. And which may or may not have ever happened back then. By the way, rabbit trail. people sometimes think that the Regency was the Victorian period and they think
Mm.
everyone was prudish. The Regency was actually an extremely permissive time, like more so almost than we are today, seriously. So the more you research, the more I'm just like, oh, holy mother. And there's some really fun diaries of people who would have been like Elizabeth Bennet's age, and they live into the Victorian period. And then when they tell stories to their children are like horrified by the things their parents
Mhm.
did, because the Victorians were very prudish. But in Regency times, they kind of did whatever they wanted as long as they had a few rules that didn't really make a lot of sense. And as long as you followed those rules, you could get away with anything. So I think Anne would have snuck out into the garden in the middle of the night, especially in the country when nobody was going to know. So anyway, but okay, here's something I have thought about is writing a Pride and Prejudice persuasion crossover,
Mhm.
because I've always thought that Anne Elliot would make good friends with the Bennett sisters. So I thought maybe if they went to school
Okay.
together, or maybe if they met each other in town. There's a lot of changing that has to happen to make that
Mhm.
work, but I feel like it could potentially work. So, or
It
maybe like
could.
Darcy take a ship. Oh. Okay. So Captain Wentworth can be the captain of the ship that takes Colonel Fitzwilliam wherever. They become friends during this time, and then Colonel Fitzwilliam introduces Captain Wentworth to Darcy. There, did like got it done.
And this is how we inspire a story that you're going to start writing as soon as we end this interview to
Yeah.
publish in 2021 so we can read a persuasion book. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you for the question.
Okay, so Elizabeth, seriously, what's next? So maybe not a persuasion book.
Oh
I
gosh.
keep
Okay.
hoping, but maybe not that. But
Yeah.
what's
Actually,
coming next?
I am in the middle of a couple of projects. Um,
Okay.
so I'm writing a short story that I have no idea what I will do with it. Mostly just, I guess, writing it. And then I know what I'll do with it when I'm done. It's short, so it's kind of an exercise. Okay, so I have this book. I'm not going to tell you too much about it in case I don't finish it in time and someone steals it. But I have this book that I've been working on off and on for a little while. I'm going to finish that up. And I'm probably like 20% of the way into that one. And it's very different from anything I've done before. They always are. Then, so do you remember 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, I went to Italy in the summer of 2018 to
Hmm.
celebrate my husband's 40th birthday, right? So,
Yeah.
so Sasha and Sasha's my Ukrainian. So we went to Capri for the day, and it's very swanky. And we took this ferry, and we're sitting on the, and this is the life of a writer, y'all. Like, this is true story, this happened. So we're on this ferry, and it's like beautiful scenery. We're alone, no children, like it's all good. And it's this big celebratory trip. And I totally ditched my husband because I got this idea for this book. And so he went and
You
sat
did
like
not.
2 rows. I totally ditched him. And he went and sat 2 rows over, and I took a flyer, like some sort of brochure for some like boat ride that you could take or something. And I wrote, like, sketched out all the ideas of the story, looking out at this like romantic scenery by myself with my paper and jotted it all out. So that's next. And I'm working on that one. And it's based off of what often inspires me is like one random line in PMP. Because, like, with Sons of Pemberley, Darcy says, my excellent parents, my father especially was this like excellent man. So I
Hmm.
kind of took that and obviously expanded it into a 130,000 word novel. So I'm kind of doing that now with something Mrs. Bennett said, and it's like a massive twist. So I don't know how that's going to work. And then I also had this like story that I'm jokingly calling Come to Jesus. Are you familiar with this phrase?
No.
Okay, so we have this phrase in the United States. I don't know if it's everywhere, but when you have this like big moment when you realize all the big things, and somebody maybe tells you something you never knew before, like your parents telling you you were adopted, that would be a come to Jesus conversation. So
Okay.
it's like this big moment. So I labeled it as come to Jesus in my file. I just got the idea randomly like last April, and I've jotted out like, I don't know, like 6,000 or 7,000 words on that one. So I'm looking at those two novels that are both historical that I need to work on. And then I've got this other one that I'm fiddling with, and we'll see kind of. Yeah, we'll see. So I've got 3 books in the works. I will kind of choose one to focus on. I'll kind of probably write in all of them. And then whichever one I feel like has more heat on it, then I'll get in there with that one. But I'm hoping to have another book ready for a spring release since I have 3 partial manuscripts already.
Okay, so it's good news to everybody. So you can
Yeah.
start reading Sons of Pemberley because you're going to have a new one in 6 months or something like that, right?
Love for like a late March, mid-April. Like I would love an April release. So I'm writing so much now. It's weird. I'm in a really good writing phase. Like I'm just
Yeah, I
writing.
still remember the time when you would tell me, text me every day to tell me to write.
Yeah.
Now you don't need that anymore.
No, oh my God, I don't need it at all. Do you want to know a secret? So I wrote Sons of Pemberley without an epilogue. And I wondered if it needed an epilogue. And I was like, I don't know, because it's hard sometimes as the writer because I'm so intimately connected to all of these characters that I know so much more than the reader knows. So it's sometimes hard to gauge whether or not they need it. And I kind of felt like it needed it. So I started one, hated it. Then I moved on, started another one. I posted this on my website, which is the first time I've ever done that. I don't ever post things on my website. So I posted it as I was writing the ending, which I have never done. I always like finish the story before I share it. And I asked them like, do you think this needs an epilogue? And unanimously, everybody was like, yes, we need an epilogue. We need to know what happens. Like, clear this up for me, please. So I wrote a partial epilogue like Wednesday. Thursday, everybody said you need one. So I wrote another like 500-word epilogue when I realized that first one was too involved and it wasn't going to work. So then I got 500 words into this one. Then I realized it was terrible. Friday, I wrote a 6,000-word epilogue on Friday, shared it Friday night, sent it to my editor and was like, I need a last-minute edit on this epilogue. I think it's good. I felt it. Like sometimes when you're writing, like you've got it, like you just know got it. I mean, I swear I was almost passed out as I was writing. I was like, I was so exhausted. My hands were cramped for like a week and a half. I couldn't write because I'd been writing so much. But yeah, I wrote the epilogue the day before the book published. The day.
So you're on a writing spree.
Yeah, and I don't know what's happened. I've got the joy back, and I hope that doesn't come back to bite me in the ass. Like knock on wood, I've got the joy back. Like sometimes writing it's interesting because it's an artistic pursuit, but then it also becomes a source of income. And a lot of artists talk about this, that when they start having to do their craft as a job, it gets a little.
It's hard.
Yeah, it kind of takes the fun out of it a little bit. It makes it a little bit rough. So yeah, I was.
That's why you have to write a persuasion book.
Maybe it'll get me.
Because that will be just for the fun, not for the profit, just for the fun.
Yeah, maybe I will. Who knows? So, but
I hope so.
I got in the zone. I'm on a writing spree. I'm writing a lot all the time. It's good. So I don't know how long that will last. Like, but yeah, so far so good.
Okay, that's good. So we have more to come on 2021. I'm happy about that. I'm sure everybody's going to be happy as well. And I want to thank you, Elizabeth, for being here with me today. It's been so amazing. It was a special moment for me. My first interview on video with you.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It was such a great idea, and I am so proud of us that we figured this out.
Yeah, so it was kind of genuine. So we didn't practice. Everything was kind of, just on the spree of the moment. So hopefully people will like it. And yeah, and thank you so much for being here. Maybe we can do it next time. Let's see.
Yes. Oh my gosh, yes. And it's so good to see you. Like,
yes, finally.
Susan and I are friends in real life.
I will be visiting you in March, I hope.
Oh,
fingers crossed.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's perfect. You can come here and visit me in March, and you can read the manuscript, and we can do a live interview with you sitting here next to me about the new book.
Okay, that's a deal.
Okay,
that's a deal. Okay. So thank you, Elizabeth, and speak to you later.
All right,
Okay. Thank you,
bye.
everybody, for being here. Bye.